Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. This is a no-post video, or rather a no-power video. I've got this NZXT H500, I think this chassis is, custom build here that came in the other day, and it does not power on. Now, we had a big old power cut in my area, like I think the entirety of North Dorset in England went out. It was a big power cut, something like 16,500 homes were without power for about an hour or two, which is fairly significant for us. Doesn't happen very often around these parts. And as what often happens when there is a fairly significant power cut, is the following day I had a lot of people coming in with stuff that wouldn't turn on. Because when the power goes out or when it comes on, it's often dirty. Computers don't like brownouts, they don't like the surge when the power comes on and stabilizes and stuff like that. So first of all, pro tips, buy surge protectors because they work. And secondly, if the power dies, turn off your computer. And switch it off at the socket, switch off the power supply, or unplug it. It doesn't matter how far you go, but just word of advice, if the power dies, turn off the surge protector going to your computer. And that way, when the power comes on, just leave a light switched on or something like that. When you see the power come on, give it 5 minutes to make sure that it's not going to immediately die again. Then turn all of your stuff back on. So yeah, that's my advice. Because it seems to happen quite often. Doesn't cost anything to just switch something off at the wall when the power goes out. Anyway, all of that aside, this is one of the victims of that by the sounds of things. So let's see what's going on. We've got a dust filter here that belongs at the front of the computer. I'll put that back in a moment. So where we're up to, I've got this thing plugged in. We've got a power cable going into it. The power supply is turned on, and when I push the power button, nothing happens. It's stone dead. Now, when there's been a power cut, and especially if the computer is stone dead, the first and most obvious thing that you might suspect is the power supply. So let's check if the power supply's got anyone at home at all. I'm going to turn off the power supply, and I'm just going to unplug the major power cables in the computer. So GPU, motherboard, and the EPS cable, or the CPU. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to plug in a power supply jumper. I call these things capos after, that thing that you put on a guitar to cap half the strings off. But yeah, we plug one of these in, and what this does is it has a little wire link in it from pin, let's see, it is pin 16 to pin 17. And that bridges the power on pin. So what happens now is the power on pin is bridged to ground, which tells the power supply to turn on. So I've got that connected, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the power supply on, and we'll see if the power supply starts. And the answer to that is yes, because I can feel that the fan is blowing air from the back. So the fan has started spinning, and I just heard a hard drive in this thing spin up, because the hard drive is still connected. So if we manually start the power supply, there is power. So something is happening. This doesn't mean that the power supply works. Likewise, at this point, there's already someone typing into the comment section, this is why I've got a PSU tester. It's got these little lights on it. Those don't really tell you anything either, because I would wager that if we put a power supply tester on this, all of the little blinking LEDs on it will come on as well. But the problem is, to really test a power supply, you actually have to put a load on it. And little power supply testers, all the ones that I've ever seen, don't put any significant load on the power supply. Whereas when you try and start the computer, that puts a load on it. So what we know here, we have not proven that the power supply is not faulty. However, if we had done this and the power supply was stone dead, 99.9% likely that it's a dead power supply, and I would not be bothering to record this video. I would just change the power supply. So I'm going to roll the intro, and we're going to look a little bit closer at this. Alright, so I said that it might still be the power supply, so how can we tell if it is still the power supply after all? Well, you plug a different power supply in. So let's plug in a different power supply and see if the system starts up. If the system starts with another power supply, then, well, yeah, the power supply dies when you actually put a load on it. Whereas if it still doesn't work, then there's something else wrong. And I know it's somewhat of a cop-out to just throw spare parts at a problem until the computer works again, but unfortunately it does remain as honestly the most efficient way of fault finding. You can take some educated guesses and you can work on vibes and have gut feelings, which I often do, but ultimately throwing parts at a problem will solve it. So the best I can really do is just tell you of instances I've seen and what my vibes are, and if you're stuck in a situation where you don't have the spare part to test, then maybe you can make an educated guess. If nothing else, a lot of my waffling is purely intended to just highlight these are common misconceptions or common old wives' tales that I hear in computer diagnostics that are just simply not true, or at least misunderstood. Alright, that should be enough for it to turn on. The hard drive that's in there won't have power, but that doesn't matter. We just need to see something. So, right, power, and power. Still nothing. Okay, so at this point we have no reason to believe that this is power supply related. The platform is dead. Okay, right, let's get rid of the testing power supply then. Of course, there is also the very out there possibility that we've got a dead power supply and something is wrong with the platform, but one thing at a time. Right, so let's start going through the usual suspects then. So I'm going to start out just by doing a BIOS reset on this, which I kind of hope won't work because when you do a BIOS reset and the computer comes back to life, that's kind of boring as far as a video goes. So I've popped out the battery and, you know, there is a reset jumper down there, but you know what's easier than holding the reset jumper at a weird angle and hoping that it's working is just taking out the battery. And at the same time, we can use this as an opportunity to check if the battery is flat or not. And even if the computer is not that old, it's still worth doing this because it's not uncommon to find fairly new motherboards with just flat batteries in them, just because these things are kind of garbage, basically. So let's see what we've got. We've got 3.12 volts. That's completely fine. That's midlife cycle. So on a desktop computer, anything above 3.0 is fine. They're so easy to replace that I generally let them run pretty low before I get concerned. On a laptop, I preemptively replace them when they're below 3.1 volts, simply because they're a pain to get to on laptops, so you want to do preventative maintenance while you're there and you have it in pieces. On a desktop, it's so easy to get to that it doesn't matter. Cool, right, let's put that in. Theoretically, the BIOS reset should happen virtually instantly, but I usually wait what I call a polite 60 seconds or so. Basically the amount of time it takes me to check the voltage of it. Okay, let's plug all of this stuff back in and see if that's done anything. Editor's note, I've often had comments from people saying, oh, you should check the battery while it's in circuit because the voltage will sag a little bit while it's in circuit and it will recover a bit when you remove it from the motherboard. This is technically correct. That will happen. The battery will recover a little bit once it's out of circuit and there isn't a load on it. However, in the instance of BIOS batteries like this, the load is so tiny and the voltage sag is so low that this isn't really a concern. You're probably talking like, I don't know, maybe 50 millivolts. And if the voltage is low enough that that's going to alter your decision, you should probably just replace the battery anyway. So this is technically correct, but it's not something that particularly bothers me because the voltage swing of coming off of load isn't big enough to matter, in my opinion. Another interesting comment I saw as well was about whether it was safe to handle the battery between your fingers, where oils and sweat on the fingers could short out the terminals of the battery and things like that. Kind of, sort of, you know, like if you've got really clammy hands, then yeah, there's technically a little bit of water there and, you know, it could it could provide a path to short the battery out, but in reality, even with damp hands, the resistance is still going to be just too high to matter on any normal battery. You would need to get up to a fairly large or high voltage battery, you know, like pushing up to 40 or 50 volts, before there's actually enough energy there to overcome such a poor connection. Obviously, putting the battery directly into water is not going to do it any good. But even then, if you got a battery just splash wet and then you take it out of the water again, it will almost instantly be okay. Long-term exposure would be the enemy in that case. Of course, when you're plugging the cables in, make sure that they're locking in properly. You want to hear the locking connectors on them actually click into place. And broadly speaking, if you've got fingernails, you should not be able to get your fingernail between the plug and the connector. Alright, that looks good. Let's see if anything's happened. Still nothing. Okay. What could be causing a problem here? This is going to be something pretty fundamental, given that it's just stone dead. I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the platform out of the case. So by the platform, I mean the motherboard, CPU, and RAM. So just the interior of the computer. We're just going to disconnect everything, take the screws out, lift that out, so we can just bare boot it on the bench. A lot of people call this a bare boot, where they'll go around and just unplug all of the cables, unplug anything that is not mission critical. But for me, personally, I tend to just go the whole way and just take the whole motherboard out of the case, because that also eradicates the possibility of bizarre short circuits and things sticking into places they shouldn't be and stuff like that. It's not that much more work to just take the board out. So let's get on with that. Alright, we're set up on the bench now. Power supply on, and still nothing. Ooh, however, I think I've just spotted something. Something looks like it's exploded over here. I didn't spot that when I took the motherboard out. However, I have just seen it. Let me take a closer look at that. Oh yeah. Yeah, that component looks extremely exploded. Let's bring that under the microscope and take a look. So we're over, there's the PCH heatsink and the SATA ports, and we're just up over here. So what is this area doing? That Nuvoton chipset, I think, yeah, that's the driver to this fan header here for sysfan 4, and we're close by to that. That's a MOSFET for something. So again, we've got power for something going on here. I'm just not sure what. And this guy, whatever it is, looks like it's exploded. I'm just going to scrape away at the top there. I'm just scraping away the entire component. Yeah, there's nothing left of that. That's just gone bang. Okay. Alright. Let's clean up the wreckage site there. This could be an ATX board repair video, folks. I'm excited. ATX board repair is very often a dead end for me. It's very rare that you get something this obvious. So this is probably a MOSFET just because it's got big traces going to it, which are probably going to be power traces. And MOSFETs can take a couple of different shapes and sizes. Oh, I just realized I raised up the height of the desk and just the monitor, the camera's not high enough. Hold on. So this is going to be some kind of MOSFET because it's got some big power traces going to it. And MOSFETs can have a lot of different shapes and sizes on motherboards, depending on just how big they are and their general roles. Like a lot of the time when we talk about MOSFETs, you think something like this, because this is also a MOSFET, and you can very quickly tell because it's got big power traces going to it on both sides. So we've got a source, a drain, and then that one there is going to be the gate, that single trace going into the corner there. But this can also be a MOSFET. We can have a source, a drain, and a gate on these 3 pins it has in some order. Or it might just be some kind of regulator. So there's a lot of things that could be. So first things first is let's see if there are any grounds around there. Let's see if anything is shorted, if it has a path to ground at all. And then we can maybe try and make sense of what we're looking at. So put the multimeter into ohms mode. And with my black probe on a ground, let's just see what we get reading around here. So we've got a ground there. That's 50 ohms, which is a fairly arbitrary number. That's a ground. That's 2.2 ohms, so that's a very arbitrary looking number. And so what about this MOSFET? That's reading in the kilo ohms. And that side is reading ground. Fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the hot air on and I'm going to desolder the remains of this and see what happens and just see what those voltage rails go to. So let's get that off the board and just see if we clear up any existing shorts. I'm going to start by putting a little bit of leaded solder on all of the joins, and that will just lower the melt point with some leaded solder and make it easier to remove. This guy might be welded down because it's obviously seen some heat due to exploding. I'm going to go carefully here because where there's been a huge amount of heat on the board here, there's a big danger of ripping pads. So I'm going to go to about 400 degrees and I'm going to be really sure that this thing is ready to come off before I try and pull it away. Whoop, that MOSFET's ready to go. Oh, these pads are shot. It's welded. Okay, this is damage control now. It's hard to get my tweezers in here because the RAM is in the way and stuff. Oh, it's hideous. Shit. Alright. Let's back off of that for a sec. Okay, right. That's going to just rip up all of those pads if I try and pull it off. And I'm going to turn it around so I've got better access. And I'm going to try and flow those pads again just to see if I can just unweld those legs. Alright, I think we're almost good there. Get some solder blobs under there just to transfer all the heat. And I'm going to stick a load of flux on that as well, just again to move the heat around. Right, these pads might come off, and whatever happens, happens, and we'll just have to fix that damage. Right, I've knocked a capacitor sideways, but that's minor. We shall fix him presently. Alright, that was a modest recovery. These pads are all lifting slightly, but they are intact, although that guy looks torn, so we'll need to do a little bit of repair work there, but that's pretty minor. Question the first. Has anything changed with our readings? We've got a ground pad. We've got a high resistance pad. And we've got a very high resistance pad. So yes, our readings have changed. This was reading like 2.2 ohms. So this has changed. That's great. So I think that MOSFET was shorted to ground, or that regulator or whatever it was, that component was shorted to ground and it has a path to ground, and we have removed that short. We should just check. Let's just see if I can get a read on this capacitor super quick. Yeah, that guy's fine. I'm going to try and get a measurement on it, just in case I lose it. That is 19 nanofarads, so that's probably a 20 or a 22 nanofarad capacitor. So we'll make a mental note of that. I'll try not to lose it. We'll put it back on the board. That's fine. So, question the second. What was that? Do we need it? And do we have a spare? Now, I don't offhand have access to the board view and schematic for this B450 Tomahawk Max motherboard. However, what I do have access to is a bunch of dead MSI X570A Pro motherboards. Shout out to Joey Does Tech for sending these in. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to repair them because they've all got massive frickin' holes in them that were absolutely beyond economic repair. However, this is from the same period as the B450 Tomahawk. And there's a good chance that we're going to find a lot of things in common between these, especially with auxiliary rails and stuff like that. And hey-ho, over on the corner here, we don't have any of the fan headers nearby, but right next to the screw hole up halfway up the right-hand side, we've got a very similar looking arrangement. So once again, if we come in on our dead board here, and I just focus down on that, we had this MOSFET package, and then our exploded package, and then some supporting components around it there. Pay close attention to like this 8-pin dude here as well. And now take a look at this X570 board. This is the screw hole halfway up the right hand side, and again we've got a MOSFET, we've got this one non-exploded, and again we've got that 8-pin jobby right there. Now it's the exact chip numbers are not going to be a perfect match, but they are awfully similar. This guy here starts with SO, same thing on the board down there. We've also got the MOSFET, and the package that we're looking for here, that starts with a P0, so does our one. Like, I don't know, man. I'm telling you, I would bet money that those are the same part, or at least the same rated part. There is a good chance that this is a fairly generic regulator for some rail coming in off of the 24-pin ATX connector. I couldn't tell you what it does. Maybe someone in the comments can tell me. But I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pot shot at replacing that. So let's take this one off, put it on our dead board, and see if it all comes back to life. I should switch to a smaller soldering iron tip for this capacitor. Oh god, yeah, okay, we're changing tips. What? Good enough. Right, we have replaced the exploded component with one that has not exploded, and we've put on the parts that were removed. Let's take some more measurements and just take stock. So we already know that this is a ground, but I'll check it again just to be sure. Ground. Ground. High resistance. And very high resistance. Good. So of course, we've no idea what those are supposed to be reading. However, when you've got something that is doing some kind of power regulation, it's a pretty safe bet that you shouldn't be seeing, like, you know, 50 ohms and 2 ohms and things like that around a reasonably high-powered component, unless it's actually like feeding into silicon. When you're around silicon, like the PCH or the CPU or something like that, things get a little bit more spooky and nebulous, or just low power rails in general. However, like the 2.2 ohms that we were seeing there, that didn't look right, and now we're not seeing that. So we can be reasonably assured that we've done something. Let's try and power this thing on. Praying to the repair gods that this doesn't just catch fire and explode the moment I try and power it on because of some other fault downstream. If it does, then we're scrapping the board because it's a B450, so who cares? This was arguably not economic to do in the first place, but because I just happened to have spare boards on hand, I'll plug a beep speaker in as well, so if it does post, we should get a beep from it. And just because we shouldn't really be risking it, let's also take out the SSD, so we're not... If it does explode, then hopefully maybe we don't explode the customer's SSD as a special treat. Okay, right, here we go. Power supply on. And something's burning. It's burning. I saw the faintest bit of smoke coming from there. We didn't put the RAM in either, so it was never going to post. However, I definitely saw some smoke coming up from there. Let's quickly check this other MOSFET. We should have checked this while we were taking measurements. I got a bit excited and was just like, a thing has exploded, let's replace the exploded thing. But you've got to ask the question, why did the thing explode? Right, so I've put the multimeter into diode mode, so let's just check around this MOSFET here. .12, that looks kind of wonky. And 0.06. That doesn't look right. So I'm not a MOSFET expert. Yeah, we've got a nice 760 millivolts to the gate. One volt there. And just check gate to the other side. Yeah. We're expecting like half a volt readings here. The gate is fine, but the source drain readings look very low to me. We've got a board to compare with. So let's get the other board. Hold on. So here's our donor board, and if we do the same diode readings across this guy, there you go, there's half a volt, and swap around again. 1.2 volts. So again, I don't know exactly what numbers to expect when reading MOSFETs like this. I'm just expecting like over half a volt. Whenever I see something that is less than half volt drops, I'm suspicious. And the gate, yeah, quite a lot. Quite a lot. And like 730 millivolts. So we're getting different readings. You know what? I'm gonna go no guts, no glory and move the MOSFET as well. Should we change whatever this thing is? The problem is I don't want to just blindly swap components without knowing what the component does. But, like, I don't know, man. We've come this far. I may as well. I don't even know what this circuit does. Four CO24. 4CO24. Nice. First of all, I'm going to check the readings again on... Going to check the readings on this weird regulator thing, just in case we've blown it up again, because if we've blown it up again, I'll have to replace it again, which is going to suck. Yeah, it's dead. That's gone short. That's ground. And that's gone low resistance. Yeah, okay, we killed it. Alright, that's fine. Through the magic of having like 3 of these goddamn X570 boards, I have more spares. Out of an abundance of caution, I replaced that weird 8-pin thing as well. So we've done not a full windscreen wiper repair here. A windscreen wiper repair is where you would just clear every component off of the board that is part of that circuit and replace it from your donor board. It's a very brute force approach where you just go, I don't know what any of this stuff is, we'll just replace the whole lot because something there has exploded. And it's very easy to do and very effective when you have a donor board for it. However, because I don't have an exact match, I'm just replacing those major components and we're going to hope for the best. So yeah, let's try again and fingers crossed nothing catches fire. If it doesn't work this time, I think I'm just going to say I don't know what's wrong with it and give up. I'm also going to get the thermal camera out for this, so I've got half a chance of just seeing the problem in action, so fingers crossed. Okay, that's not ideal, but here goes nothing. It's probably going to blow up anyway. Power supply on. Power supply off. Alright, so I've got a third one of those, so we could replace it for the third time, but also at this point, I don't know what this does. And I can go and research. We can look up a board view. We can try and find out. But I'll level with you. It's a B450 motherboard. This motherboard is worth maybe £30 kind of thing. So it's just not worth it. We'll put a new motherboard in the computer and we'll send it on its way. I think I've got a B450 motherboard lying around, so I will just replace it at this point. That's a bit of a cop-out answer because it would be nice to know so we could maybe change it, but man, if you're versed in ATX board repair and you know what circuit I'm looking at, leave a comment down below because that's probably doable and you can see how I can take parts from a donor motherboard with a hole in it to fix that, but I don't know, that could be a subrail going to the PCH and we could have a dead PCH. So I think I'm wasting my time at this point. Let's put a different board in the PC so we can get this PC up and running again. Okay folks, so the audio in this section sounds like this.
Or two later, this one sat around waiting for the customer for quite a while, and along with...
Because I picked up the wrong mic from the charging box and didn't sound check. I did consider voiceovering everything because I did a lot of commentary in this section about motherboard selection and rebuilding other people's computers and things like that. But this video is already looking kind of long, so we're just going to montage this. So take it away, Thomas Hood. Now we're built up again, I'm going to turn it on and make sure it posts into BIOS. I've already downloaded the latest BIOS for this motherboard, so we'll flash that update before everything else. And now we can dial in a basic setup by turning on Precision Boost Overdrive and Extreme Memory Profiles. I'm not going to bother tuning this because we'll be thermally limited by that AMD box cooler anyway, but in the future a 5700X3D or a 5800X3D will drop straight into this motherboard, and with a bigger cooler it'll be able to do big numbers as far as AM4 is concerned. I'll also make sure that FTPM is enabled, Secure Boot is enabled, and CSM is disabled, so we'll have the modern Windows 11 security setup. These settings are supposed to be on by default on a modern BIOS, but in my experience that's not always the case, so you should always check them, otherwise certain games might throw up errors. Finally, we can save all of this and make sure that Windows boots. And with that, we're finished. Yes, I'm just as heartbroken that these stickers are on the cellophane as you are. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye!